everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a terrific Friday. Today we're going to talk about the next episode of the case studies of Vanitas. Of course, episode 15. This episode had quite a bit in it. Stuff from Noe, we got a little bit of stuff from Vanitas, but really this episode's primary focus was on Chloe. I think there's just a lot of stuff that I've forgotten since I watched part 1 of Vanitas, and I have been reminded in this episode that that is the case. Either way, this episode is quite fantastic, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So this scene starts off with Noe, and the first couple scenes really are kind of Noe heavy, or from the perspective of Noe, and I feel like these scenes were trying to just develop Jean-Jacques, because this is the person that we see with Chloe all the time, so we need to know his motivations, and his motivations seem pretty interesting. He is basically going along with whatever Chloe does, because in many ways he wants to make her happy. I sense there's some underlying romantic feelings, or at the very least some sort of familial feeling between the two, to where Jean-Jacques just wants to make sure that she's happy, and since the shadow gave her happiness, then he's inclined to defend that decision by Chloe, despite knowing, as well, while he doesn't know this, despite knowing that the shadow, Nania, I think is what they called her in this episode, is actually manipulating Chloe into going along with her every whim, which is really funny because Nania even tells Noe that, they couldn't just take Chloe by force. They couldn't just curse Chloe by force because Chloe was way too strong and way too powerful, so they had to go about it through different means, and the way they chose that is, in my opinion, through manipulation, and especially near the end of this episode, or the very last scene really of this episode, is the shadow tries to make it seem like she's the one that killed Jeanne, or as well, try to get her to, instead of, I like the way they worded it, instead of using her wings to bear her fangs. I thought that was really well written in terms of a line, and it really shows, in my opinion, the true intentions of that character, which is to manipulate and take advantage of, which is kind of interesting when you juxtapose it with the other stuff that happened in this episode with Chloe and August. August came into Chloe's life and really kind of like helped spread her wings a little bit, so to speak, in the sense that he introduced her to Jeanne, but as well gave her company and treated her fairly well. It actually wasn't until one day he came to Chloe with obviously an eye missing of some kind and demanded the research from the Diapicheers, I think is how you pronounce it. Somebody put in the comments below, please help me. Oh my god, these words. They're not Japanese or English, I don't know them. So I was really surprised when August bit into Chloe and try to basically take advantage of Chloe. So to me, this shows the true intentions of August that we've kind of known since the end of part 1 of this series. He did something similar to Noe. We don't exactly know what his true intentions behind it were, or what he did to Noe, but he did something similar. So it makes it seem like, at least in my opinion, that August is somewhat of a smooth operator in the sense that he is, well, maybe more of like a politician, actually, in the sense that he seems like, on the outside looking in, like a really cool guy, but he actually has his own intentions and he doesn't really mind to take advantage of other people, despite him seemingly having some towards of a resentment towards his own actions after he did what he did to Chloe, because he tries to say something. I think he tries to apologize, but he never does and leaves. And of course, Chloe months later gets a letter that the human vampire wars have ended, and August was a big architect of that happening. It's just a really interesting juxtaposition between those two figures in Chloe's life, because, with the shadow, it seems like the shadow really tried to manipulate her in a different way than August did. I feel like August tried to legitimately help better Chloe's life, but when he knew that there was something that Chloe had that could make his life better, he tried to take advantage of that rather than just simply not, or not try to take it by force, maybe try to work something out. And if those things cannot be given out, then he kind of has to accept that. And I think when he was told no, he was like, well, I gotta get this through some means, and so he tried to do what he did and it just didn't work. So I think it's really interesting when you compare those two, because it's just one of them obviously was a big help in Chloe's life, even though they wanted something in the end after the fact, it seems, whereas the Shadow just outright manipulates from the very beginning to give something that Chloe can obtain, even though I think, in my opinion, I don't think the Shadow has given Chloe anything of value yet, besides just being a cursed beast and manipulating her, which is rather unfortunate in my opinion, because Chloe, at least seemingly from these characters, is a very tragic but sympathetic figure. She's tragic in the sense that she was just sadly turned into a vampire with seemingly out her knowing at all, and she's doubly tragic and sympathetic for that fact because like all of her family has died, and technically she has as well. They at one point, because her body stopped aging once she turned 11, they just perceived her as dead to everybody else. They basically said, yeah, she died, and they kept her totally hidden from anybody and everybody, and thus she led an extremely lonely life while her family tried extremely hard to study the world formula to make this alteration engine to try and turn Chloe back into a human, and they eventually just all died, and they never succeeded in that fact quite at all. And it's such a sympathetic and tragic story, in my opinion. This little girl woke up, she turned into a vampire, didn't know why. Everyone tried to help her. It wasn't a situation like in any other anime you see where the parents were awful. No, literally everybody loved this girl, tried the best they could to help her. They all died and went away. She became extremely lonely and was eventually manipulated by a Shadow and a lot of her friends that came around. And even when she found friends, they would disappear for months on end. That is such a tragic and sympathetic story. I don't know how anyone could come away from these episodes and not go, wow, I am rooting for Chloe, even though she sorta is kinda being manipulated to be on the bad side of things right now. I think what this episode made me want the most after watching it was not only to see Chloe kind of succeed and, be freed from this life that she's currently in, but as well to not be lonely anymore, to meet with Jane again and become friends with her again, and those two interact and, actually have her go to places where she's never been before and just interact with cool stuff, not be in this lonely big castle. Almost reminds me of something from Fate, like Eliasville von Einsburn is a very similar character in that instance, where she lives in this giant castle all alone and she's extremely lonely, and she's technically like a psychopathic murderer, like evil character, but you're still very sympathetic towards the character because she's very tragic and lived this tragic life, and it's a tragic life she didn't deserve. And I think that's the same thing with Chloe. It's a very tragic life that Chloe never quite deserved, or was never given an explanation for why she's going through what she went through. And I think that's something that I as a person can as well relate to with Chloe. She is a very lonely person, and I feel like that is a very relatable thing in this day and age. I think a lot of people are very lonely. I think they call it the lonely epidemic of this generation or whatever it is. And so I think this story makes Chloe a very sympathetic figure just for that fact alone. And because of that, I think that character is honestly one of my favorites right now. I came away from this episode just really loving this character and the idea behind this character. That's one big long rant on Chloe, but I mean that's also a rant on most of what happened in this episode, but I really love this character and I dig this character, and I think this is a home run for this series. This was such a brilliant episode in my opinion, even though it was mostly backstory and exposition dumping, but it was the good kind. It wasn't the SAO kind where they go to a cafe and they talk about stuff they should easily explain multiple episodes before in a very much more well-paced manner. Honestly, we kind of just discussed 95% of the episode. Everything else is really small fry kind of stuff, but important stuff. I think Jean-Jacques being this guy who tries his best to help Chloe. He's really good at a lot of stuff, and I think he's kind of underrated in that fact. So really enjoy Jean-Jacques. He seems like a pretty cool character. We learn that Dante's mission is that he wants to get the alteration engine, if it exists, to Marcus Machina, who is the robot guy, back to him. That's his mission. So we know Dante he has his own motives, which is very interesting, I think, in a series like this so far, because you have Vanitas, who has his own motives for seemingly good. You have Jeanne, who works for the church, which is very obviously an evil figure in this series. After this episode, you cannot deny that Jeanne is working on the wrong side here, and like I said with my theory from last week's episode, I think there's something going on. And if you haven't watched last week's episode, you definitely should, because I did a pretty banger video on last week's episode, I think, in my opinion. Even though I forgot some stuff, which we'll talk about right now. I didn't even make the connection that Lou was Louis, Dominique's family member. I didn't even make that connection. That's so great. I love it. Quintessential SeaTactics right there. Forgetting stuff. I also like seeing small Jeanne. That was really cute. Small Jeanne is super adorable. I like her interactions with Chloe. I like how Jeanne really gave Chloe a bit of freedom, a bit of, fun that Chloe didn't have before. Before, Chloe didn't even want to step out of the castle. She thought it would be weird and, well, not weird necessarily, but she didn't think that she could do it, and she did. And Jeanne and Chloe had a lot of fun. They were just played and laid in a field of flowers, and it was adorable. It just kind of made me want to cry. It really did. It really did, though. Like, I'm joking right there, but no, it really did. That was super wholesome. That's probably, I think, my favorite scene of the entire episode, just because there wasn't a lot that needed to be said during that scene, and you got so much from it. You could really feel the emotion coming off that scene and what it all implied, because it was just a really good scene. It was super wholesome, and I really enjoyed it. It was super cute. And I love when, well, I don't really love this, I guess you could say, but I love when Jeanne and August have to go away again, and Jeanne's crying, because as we know, Jeanne looked up to Chloe as like a big sister type, which obviously, how could you not? Chloe, it reeks big sister energy, but I like how Chloe as well, while Jeanne's crying, has kind of tried her best not to cry. That was super cute, also a little sad at the same time. It was bittersweet, to say the least. And then at the very end, yeah, it seems like Chloe has activated the alteration engine. I want to call it the altering engine for some reason. That's where I want to go with. I don't know why. So yeah, no, the episode, I'm really looking forward to it. It seems like next week's episode is going to be a pretty big episode, especially for the character of Chloe. We're probably going to see some pretty cool character stuff, maybe a couple fights or something like that. Maybe Noe is going to run headfirst into a tree branch again that's literally right in front of him. We'll see. Either way, should be hyped if he does run into a tree branch again that's directly in front of his face. I would love to see it. You know what? Let's upgrade to a whole tree. Let's just, he's just running and there's a tree obviously in front of him and he just runs into it. And then he turns all Moe Blob for a second. That'd be great. Otherwise, this episode was very good. I quite enjoyed it. Tell me down in the comments below what you thought about it. Really love this one. And I'll see you guys in the next week's video on Vanitas. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.